Uncle Four Eyes here, and well, we're looking at this comic today. So this is one of those comics that everyone says, "Oh, it's the greatest comic ever made," and or it's in that upper echelon in the top 10 favorite comics of all time, and blah blah blah. And they're probably right. If not, I'm also in that camp. I follow that the inception of this is a point in which I feel like everyone tries to strive to some extent. Obviously, like not every comic genre is going to go, oh, now you need to, now you need to do that with kids comics. It's like, well, no, this doesn't translate to that. But at least in terms of creating something that has a lot of staying power, it's just this has like tens across the board kind of thing where the art, the writing, just everything is so awesome. And so I'm going to be that guy that, like everyone else, that gushes over this. I reread, well, I read this #1 uh, before, because we're going to do each one. Uh, so we'll have 12 videos on 12 issues. That's the plan. And so I keep wanting to say rewatch. I read this in preparation just for the one episode so that I can then go to the next one and then do an episode and kind of just do that kind of instead of having like a omnibus or something where it's all got them all, and then I have to kind of just talk vaguely about Watchmen. We're just going to do it this way because I like this better. I have all these in this format, and it just kind of cuts it down into a more bite-sized uh, project for myself, but also if you guys can then also just watch the one video that hopefully isn't going to be like the last video, which was like an hour and a half. Um, but yeah, let's just get right into it. I can't say any more than what other people who are smarter, more insightful than me have said before, so I'll just give you my 2 cents about what I thought was cool about this. This came out in 1986, and I think it took like 2 years for this whole thing to get done because I'm pretty sure I saw like 87 on the next couple issues or whatever. So like clearly this is like I remembered like the history. Like I don't know a whole lot of it, but I'm gonna give the half-ass man's. It's not that's the layman's, but my version of it is the half-ass man's version of it, where I read that yeah, like the last two or the last one took like almost a whole year just to finish, like the the span of the project, even though it's like 12 issues, and you could argue that like 12 issues could happen within either a calendar year or arguably kind of bleeds into the next year and still is considered a limited run or like a short run. But yeah, I just remember it getting harder and harder for them to kind of, as the each one came out, to the deadline got larger, and I think it also to some extent probably is also a case of like maybe they had faith in this by that point to where they're like, it sucks that you're taking so long to draw all this or whatever, because I'm assuming that's kind of most of the time why comics are behind, or typically from the art side of things, because art drawing takes a lot longer than writing. At least what I feel like most people would agree, or most things like most experts have said, where like you could write like all the whole story for this thing in the time it takes to draw, you know, whatever. Anyways, but yeah, it's typically that's how I always hear is like, and if anyone in the industry would say, yeah, it would take me a whole month just to draw stuff when it'd take a week for me to write the day, the whatever the 23 pages or whatever of content. So in a couple days I could just type it up, but in like 2 or 3 weeks, it takes that long to create each page. Of course, the more elaborate and whatnot, obviously, more likely that's going to be. So yeah, this is just as again, like I said, I'm gonna just say it's as good as everyone would has said it is, And there's something about what. Also, of course, gonna have to talk about the adaptation of it with the movie and how the movie. I think it's a solid movie for trying to hit as many things as it can. But yeah, I think that's kind of its downfall, where it was like, I think this story is too big or has at least too many elements to where you're gonna have to omit, or you're gonna have to kind of shorten, like this. We'll come to find that this little spot, this whole first issue is what feels like is condensed in like the first couple of minutes of the movie or whatever, right? Like, I know technically there is some like this is break. There's I think yeah, I can't remember. I haven't watched the movie in a while, but I imagine like the movie has to get through this one series of like the who done it, because I'm gonna spoilers. We're doing the who done it kind of story. So like Rorschach is going to then is the one trying to head this whole who killed the comedian, and he's already going to all the prime suspects in this issue first, and it's really what kind of kicks off. Like, well, then what do we do? It only has to get either crazy, or the world's gonna have to just keep on expanding in terms of like the all the different components involved, instead of just being like, oh, we're just gonna go to one guy or whatever. Anyways, so this is really done really well. I like this first page is beautiful. The way it's, and of course, it's got the whole like 9 panel throughout the whole series, and only in certain scenarios will it be broken up. So, like in this case, the last third is dedicated just to that scene. But this pull up, or this zoom out, leading your eye, is just a piece of beautiful work in how you can get that effect of literally just feels like you're just doing a zoom out on a camera. Like there's no loss in too much of the like having to redraw something, but also have to keep it like you're like for example, and I've always talked about this with like art, where you have to like for example, you have to draw like the details of the brick here, and then here you're still drawing the details of the brick into some extent, but you're already losing. For example, you're already losing the the detail of the smiley face, where even looking at it in person, you can still see it, but on the camera you can barely see it, um, and then you can almost not barely even know that it's there. But then you're also having to then now draw the cracks and stuff at a more primitive, simple, just a line or two parallel lines. You can't really give a like in this case, you can't do any of these like nuanced like cracks and stuff and chips and stuff. And then same, and you're essentially still doing that, where you still have some character to the tiling and to like the texture of the sidewalk, but then now you're basically dealing with just hurry up and just hash out parallel dead lines that are just nothing to there's nothing really there's no character to them really, because they're your eye is going to start to fuzz those details out naturally anyway. Same with like everything else is getting lost, but you also get like you're still getting a clear like uh you're reading it clearly, because the grate, the gutter or whatever is still there, and the blood is still kind of helps kind of orientate you. To see the sidewalk here at this point is just there's no lines at all now. It's just a strip of purple. Um, the writing's beautiful in this, where like you immediately get put into Rorschach's mind, and this is one of those cases where like the writing, like a lot of times I'm like, the writing can be kind of wishy-washy, or I'm not a fan of writing if it doesn't come from the artist itself themselves, or there's some actual like effort to put something that's not just I want to punch people today. I want to tell you my pronouns and then punch you, and then it's like, okay, whatever, like nothing of substance. Um, but really, this is like how you can marry the two, like narrative, like visual narratives, or like the depiction visually, but then you get a really solid, like almost like, again, the the of the narrator's voice. You can hear Rorschach's kind of way of articulating in these journal entries. That really, I think, sets that apart, when you could easily just go, like, and that's the thing where with me, it comes from like a place of like, uh, somewhere in Metropolis, and here's our Superman, and he's out to do. It's like this omniscient narrator that has no character and is like not even worth, like, you don't care for the character, like within the narration, where like the narrated, it's like arbitrary. It's like, we just need to get the information to you as soon as possible, as quick as possible. Doesn't matter if like it's written well, which then is weird, because then it's like, I thought it was show don't tell. But then again, even this is not from the movie, where, or at least I don't remember this being it this way, where you have like detectives talking. I thought it was just straight to, um, Rorschach going and zipping up to the window. You still get to see this, of course, or whatever, like the flashback, which I think is how Rorschach kind of sees it. Like, he can kind of do his detective work, kind of plays back this scene essentially. I can't remember now. Again, I'm having to like remember the movie now, after having to remember the book, and then having to remember reference the book with the movie. Excuse me while I take a little sip of my beverage. But yeah, I really like this. The detectives talking and kind of trying to figure out like what happened, and then you're getting these, what actually happened, and then like they're just talking over these scenes, and it really just gives you like a good example of like what can be happening, and then what can be perceived in these types of scenarios, where like, the who done it, the detective kind of, like the CSI shows and stuff. It's like you just usually see this, and it's usually really fucking boring sometimes. And I think this kind of helps, where either the shows don't normally do this, or they don't like do this, because either that's gonna ruin some of the narrative or something, apparently, or whatever. But no, I think this is kind of a genius kind of, like, breakdown. So, and then the same thing was, I was just thinking about it, like how, like, if you blacked out, or like you omitted the detectives, the red, for one, has its own, like, own story, and it just kind of tells its own story. And like, even if you admitted like what they said, like, you're just seeing this happen. You're just like, okay, so guy, or some, spoilers, a guy is kicking the door in, not a woman. Kicks the door in. The guy's like, oh, I'm just watching TV, and then getting assaulted and whatnot. And it's kind of cool how like that can all be kind of looked at it, like, in isolation, and vice versa. You can just see the detectives just talking, and have that in isolation, and just how they would, they're trying to they're trying to comprehend what trying to figure out what happened. And of course, again, Dave Gibbons, right? Dave Gibbons' art is beautiful. Uh, it does exactly what it needs to be done. Again, I think the there's something about the flow of how like each of these smaller panels, and then opening up for bigger shots, really sells it well. Like, this is a good little example where you're just, the flow. This is, again, master class in kind of how would you captivate your reader as much as possible. And then I even like this kind of reference. Like, there's the Black Freighter or whatever, which is like, in the was it the uncut version, had like an animated sequence of like that pirate ship thing, and that was like an allegory or metaphor for some bullshit. Which I like the idea of it, but it's like, did that need to be included in the movie, or why would that be part of a movie when whatever? But I'm pretty sure that's a reference to that as well. I love the depiction of like an 80s, but like not like our 80s equivalent of like whatever. I forget where this is specifically, but a metropolis in America, or a high urban city. And then you've got, of course, Rorschach kind of hiding out, which I kind of like that the way he's kind of been staking out the place, waiting for the cops to leave. But yeah, you have like going back to like you have these like sci-fi punk, and it's of course it was made in the '80s, so it was like I love that '80s thinking what the future like punk scenes and like counterculture would be like. Um, Again, I think this is just a beautiful spread. Again, there's also we're in the wordless territory now. Now it's full on uh like it shows like there's like so you have this page which is Rorschach kind of giving you kind of bringing you into the world of Watchmen. I feel like his how he articulates some of the stuff, the classic case of like um dog carcass in an alley this morning, or yeah, this morning tire tread on burst stomach. Like already you're starting to kind of get an idea for what you're about to read. That's that page, and then immediately cuts into this motif, which is like, or this like this thing, like where it's the detectives talking, and then you see what had transpired. Now we're into the silent detective going to this, outlaw or whatever, like any hero going to the scene at night. He's doing his act, what is actually considered kind of a pretty golden age, silver age maneuver. He doesn't just go up through the building normally. He has to do the in an elaborate way. And again, this is beautiful. Like I really love the color palette for this is awesome, and it's they hyper fixate on the palette based using the flashlight as like that strong, almost white yellow. But yeah, like this is just the execution of how this is done. It really sells it all. Again, and it's like a really fun way to cut in. Like more normally, I hate this kind of thing where you're like, now here's the credits, but like with most comics, it's like you kind of have to flip a couple pages before you can like figure like who wrote this, who drew this, just for like the just so you can then read that and go oh, okay, and it's not at the very beginning or it's like it's not right here. Um, and I feel like this is one of those examples where it's a great example of like I kind of like how this kicks in like a movie style where you're like now we're gonna hit credit, the opening credits or the title. But yeah, this is just a great way of showing him investigating. Comes across the comedian's old outfit, and this was interesting too because I'm like I feel like this was maybe underplayed as well because I think this is why this is weird with the movie and this because it's really just like what is this 4 pages of him just basically going oh you know whatever, and I think in the movie he like does all this stuff like they condensed all this into this scene of him going through his house. And then of course we have this, and I'm pretty sure this is also in the movie. Of course, you have like the old Nightwing owl. I was gonna say Nightwing, um, and of course this also helps set up some of that like lineage in the what the world was like before you meet the main characters that are going to be focusing in this who done it. So you got of course you got to set these guys up, and everything always just feels like it lived in. Like I didn't like when I looked or when yeah, I was just looking at this. This is all you get with this guy's, at least right in this issue. This is all you really get with this guy's inside of his house, but you can kind of already feel like what his house is like or what where he lives. Like it's actually kind of fun to like you see like it's an elderly man's place, but I bet he's been there for so long that like the place around him is like still trying to be, current day graffiti, and like you could tell that he owned this place, uh, or at least his, I think I think his father, in the back it said something about how his dad worked for Vernon or something like that. Some I forget his first name or whatever is if that's his first name. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's Vernon's Auto Repairs. Uh, is it Mason? Oh no, Mason's that guy's name. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that's one and the same, where he ends up living up above the auto shop that his dad and him kind of worked at. Um, this is like the first time you see the no, who watches the Watchmen as graffiti. But I like how it just you could tell that he's always been there, and yet there's the world around him is still going forward and still being a thing. Um, again, there's more of the auto, uh, like remember what that's called, iconography, whatever it's called. But this is I like even this kind of detail where you're like we're gonna fixate on like signage and stuff. It's always fun to do that. What would it look like to draw, you know, the advertisements and stuff for a fictional world. Same with this, like these are the top knots, and they're like this, like they remind me again of like Dark Knight Returns or whatever, the Dark Knight kind of a motif where it's like this weird like Japanese punks in New York City kind of motif. But yeah, that's even kind of funny. Like that's who's in like who populates the world, and of course they'll be relevant at some point. Um, this is again is also like the lead up to like someone's broke into his house, and then you've got a good old nasty Rorschach eating beans cold, um, and then they're basically discussing someone's killing masks, that kind of thing, right? Which is basically the whole thing, you know, the day comedy died kind of a shit, right? Um, yeah, so that's basically all that is. But I love the storytelling along with their dialogue, and then so it's like, oh, come on down here, and we'll keep chatting, but I want you out of my house. um, so also this is a fun little detail. I was like, I don't remember him snagging sugar cubes, and that'll come up again. Again, they're just going to continue being like, I don't like. We used to be partners. Like maybe you would want to be part of this actual real problem that is our friends around us and associates or whatever are dying, kind of a thing. And I think he's having a lap of judgment of like, or I don't really know. And this is kind of telling. I think if you don't count, I don't even know if this one is. Fuck, where's come back? Oh wait, yeah. I mean, technically this is bigger, but I was gonna say there wasn't. This is the first time that we've had a really large shot, so this really feels like, and a lot of times that means that like it's a really big moment then, especially with because again we're basing it around timing, and since there's such a rigid, in a good way, a rigid defining pattern of like it's either 9 panels or it's 9 panels worth that get proportioned out, so everything has to be kind of symmetrical, and it's a boof, 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 like the beat and the like you would go buh and then buh 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 buh. Again, silly to say to make those noises and stuff. It's like teaching a kid or something using funny little noises. But yeah, but I feel like that's needed to kind of like emphasize the idea that like why would this scene be big when it could have just been a small one with like any of these, or why couldn't it match these smaller ones that it's been that had uh preceded, right? So Anyway, so it clearly means something to do that. And then again, we go back now. We're going back to the journal. Then we get to see some other like some fun little. This is I was wondering what this said. I thought it said Viet Bronx. I was like, that's kind of a funny sounding thing. Like the Viet Cong. There was like the whole uh, Vietnam problem. That problem. That's putting it bluntly, or simple, but and it's relevant obviously because it's mirrors our world. But I think it's kind of funny. Like, does that have anything to do? Like, is there some type of commentary on that? And then you got Happy Harry's bar grill. This is an awesome like scene. This I love the color palette always is fun, and it's very in your face where it's like these aren't subtle colors, but like I always feel like we almost are missing out on this kind of palette nowadays where I feel like making a strong statement with your yellow, purple, orange, and reddish kind of like obviously this is the like sell a sunset or whatever, but like or maybe a sunrise. Let's see. Oh, maybe it is a sunset, right? Yeah, because it's night once he heads out. Yeah, okay. Um, Awoken late or slept all day. So yeah, but yeah, like this kind of is like the sun setting, and when you open the door to a like a low lit establishment, it just gets flooded with that like super saturated um sunlight. So then I like that like that's a really good effect on that where it's not just a oh we'll just put the yellow here. He's coming in from like a bright sunny thing and then have its own lighting indoors, which you could technically do, but again, that's where like you know that's a choice you make. Same with like everything's drawn so like elegantly and nothing ever seems like it's like half-assed or anything, even though you would argue, well, he didn't draw all the windows on this. It's like, do you want to draw windows on buildings all day? Like that's no fun. You want to draw this. This is you have to do the work here. You get to have fun down here. Um, this little bit of like cityscape is there's barely anything describing that, but again, is who cares? When when you're committing to like this is already a pain in the ass to deal with. So like you're picking and choosing, I think, your battles sometimes with these designs too, where you're like, okay, well, the whole thing's got to be beautiful or the whole thing's done really well, but sometimes you do have to kind of pick your battles where you're like, it's far away, less detail, you know, there's like a compromise where you can be like, oh, well, I don't want to draw that much of it, but also it helps play with the eye, like, oh, like, well, less detail in the background means the further away it is. A lot of times that's how it works. And yeah, and then you've got a Rorschach, which I think is why the moving morphing mask in the movie was kind of a big thing because like clearly his face changes from scene to like from picture to picture, like pose to pose or whatever. So like I think that's why they had to try and figure out like what does that mean? Because clearly this isn't like a oh I'm like again because this is the fucking Watchmen book and you've already seen a lot of really like in the short time you've already seen how much effort they've put into it. I don't think you're just going to do that by accident or like just intentionally kind of go lazy and go, yeah, we're just going to do this face up close. Then it's going to look like a butterfly over here. And then it's going to, it's like, I kind of like that. It's like, how would you like, if you were to have to see it in moving, picture form, you're like, well, what if the mask is like this weird thing or shape, ship shapes or whatever the word is. Like it morphs in real time. Because otherwise, I don't know how else to describe that. Where you're like, yeah, would it just switch? Like, why does it do that? But yeah, got good old classic uh, breaking people's fingers. Like I like it's this panel. I feel like this panel really in the full scheme of it really kind of helps anchor that. Like usually there's always an anchor in stuff, And I feel like is this is this magenta? It's a straight up magenta with like a little bit of purple, right? Like it's like 100% magenta, poof, right in the center. And then it's like all these, so then it really does. I feel like even though there is some magenta here and there's some right here, um, I feel like this is an aesthetic choice to have the one where everything is that. Like again, when you like at home right now, you're looking at the center of it and you're like, oh yeah, that's like, why is that just purple? You know, whatever, magenta. Um, yeah. So then he moves on to whatever. What is his name? Ozzy Mendez, but like, what is his? Whatever his uh, Adrian Vedette. I don't know. I don't remember how he says his last name. Talks to him, plays with the action figure for a little bit. This is a pretty straightforward scene. Again, I think once he talks to them, they're like left with these big, long, kind of pondering poses, like or moments. And I don't think. Okay, yeah, you can't read anything on that monitor. I was like, I don't think I. This you can. Nuclear doomsday clock stands at 5 to 12. Warn experts. So like, uh, oh, is it New York? Oh yeah, they're in New York. Okay. But yeah, I really like this where it's just like fucking around with the action figure. His head's turned around all weird and whatnot. I also like that he's jumping out of like a really high skyscraper. Like he's still leaving that way. It's like, all right, bro. Like, I don't know if I'd want to do that with everything. Just constantly be going up and down these extremely tall buildings. Like that's kind of a death wish or an accident waiting to happen. Just going, yeah, I'm just gonna. I just hope everything works well. Like I always wonder. It's like you have a lot of faith in this little thing right here. Um, this is also kind of a neat thing. Again, going back to him monologuing, but then he's like sneaking into a facility to then end up just talking to someone he already knows, and boom, and then of course another sweet butt cheeks change up in like there's already a ton of different like like what do you call it, like variety of changing up this format of the page layout, and in this case it's to show how big, and I think this is a really good way of again, the introduction to this character. So then you're gonna, it's obviously humans are built in this way to where they fit in a tall, rectangular box. So why not then also introduce them that way as well? So like, and it being the first time you see it, so it's kind of again, it gives you kind of a each page flips kind of again like a just like with most comics, there's a page flip and there's like a kind of like even if it's not like a big thing, but like each page flip kind of counts for a reveal of some sort. So like in this case, reveal big blue man, big blue ass. Yeah, and basically he comes in and questions these guys, the last of the people that he thinks might know something, and you get just a little taste of everyone and what they're like. You can tell that like this guy is clearly some type of omnipotent character, like immense power. Um, but then he also is kind of like just doesn't care really too. So, and then going back to he also then this is where like the sugar cube comes back into play, and I like that he's just like, all right, I'm kind of hungry right now, so I'm gonna just eat these sugar cubes that I have in my pocket from the other night or whatever. Drops the wrapper and then she picks it up and throws it in the trash right here. I thought that was kind of a funny little thing where I'm like, I don't remember that in the movie. Granted, I don't remember there being sugar cubes in general, but um, yeah, and like everyone has their own like dialogue bubbles. I think this is where I was trying to like maybe take inspiration from this for like my comic book, where like I wanted like certain key characters to have their own uh like stylistic talking bubble. Where let me grab it here just for a second. Might as well for obligatory uh referencing. But like this early on, I was like, okay, well these guys all have regular ones, but then this guy I was like, well, this guy's gonna have these like spiky things come out, and then this guy's gonna have a big bold black border around his. And this guy doesn't say, well, this guy technically says something, but not, that's just a yelling noise. There's no bubble around it. But yeah, like, but then I just realized I didn't do it there. So I can't, I'm not entirely sure if I gave up. And then like, this is another example of like trying to like, I made his dialogue small in the box to make it look like he's weak and talking really quietly, and a little wobbly, shaky box there to kind of try and make that sense. But then, oh, hey, but then I brought it back. See, I don't think that goes forward. I'm pretty sure that's not going forward in the series. Either I made that a thing, but also I think that's just naturally what ended up happening. But that was a thing because clearly, you have almost what I showed you where it's like this is like a double box where it's like outline and then another outline. It would be based. It's almost like a reverse where you don't have just a big black line, thick line. You have a almost basically like a reverse one where it'd be just a thick white line, but then you've got this like kind of weird, crunchy, crispy edged for Rorschach. So yeah, and then Dan's name gets dropped, and so she wants to go hang out with him. Um, and Rorschach's just like, no one cares. Nobody cares but me. Uh, and that's pretty much the end of Rorschach, I think, where he just, I don't know what to do. So much there to do, so much little time. I like the little like crystal knock. Interesting. Like I don't know what it is about it, comics and like especially in this era and stuff where like there's like we've already seen a swastika. It's like Jesus Christ, like can't get away from that stuff. Um, but then like I feel like this is a good example of like the opposite where you're like, oh well, there's like I mean it's still referencing fucking that stuff, but um, I don't know. I don't know what is up with that where it's like the obligatory thing of doing that. Again, I like these scenes because it's like this. I feel like again was a better executed in this than the movie. I feel like the movie there was nothing. There's no character to like the inside, the interior, even them like going from out of this like pinkish like uh interior, and you can kind of see how it's pink, even though the outside's not pink, obviously. And as they leave, they're leaving the pink. That's kind of cool. And like out going out to this courtyardy area where like they end up leaning up against. I don't know. I'm assuming I would imagine you'd lean up against this thing right here because there's the little pond there. I don't know if you'd lean into ferns, even though the this looks straight. So unless this is on the edge of something else, like the edge of a building, right? I think. Oh, that's what that is. Yeah. Oh, I see. They took a turn from that, like a right turn, because that's the pond or whatever's on the corner, looking out. But yeah, then they are like basically they're gonna hook up. Spoilers. But yeah, and then you get the little uh, just a little quick little. This is where this is I think also one of those things, right, where it's like it's gonna slowly tick up, and I think that is a fun thing to do. And I think in the original, there's nothing, there's no quotes, just this, which I like this. And then the other ones they have like quotes from like I don't know famous people or something. It's weird, and like some of them I don't think even like kind of match the like are exactly the most appropriate things to do. I don't know. I just remember it being weird. I remember seeing like the every edition after this like first release. There's always like a little white text that is some I don't know I don't know whatever who it is. I don't even know who it is. So, anyways, and then there's stuff like this that's really fun where this is all just basically just excerpt from Under the Hood, which is that old man that we saw earlier. His name is oh yeah. So the guy was Vernon, but the main guy is right here, Hollis Mason. And I thought this was like a really neat way of kind of bringing some more, uh, like using the medium, because this is like a might as well be a book, especially with like this the way it's just text and then accompanied with a couple pictures here and there. But I like it's like a biography book. It's neat to kind of it's in world, but you're also reading it like again like you're in world, uh, but also you're not going to get this in the movie, like this kind of context and helping kind of uh, bring more into the world building. And so of course you're going to want to like do that. And I think I've seen that a lot with Alan Moore stuff. Like I'm pretty sure like him and was it the Extraordinary Gentleman's like series, like they were playing around with like different ways of like articulating like old time printing press comic, like old like platinum age, or not really, but like before that, even earlier than that. But I mean, the joke of it being like like early like pamphlets and stuff, where like inside, like halfway through the book, I should have bought it. I saw it the other day. Um, like halfway in the book, there's this other book inside of a book where it's smaller, and I love when they do those like inserts like that. Um, and all of a sudden it turns into another, and it's got no color. It's all like old or like old school, like printing block style, like etching style. But even though it's just Denny O'Neil or Dennis O'Neil, I forget who it is. Um, like it just is him drawing, but he's doing it in that aesthetic when the rest of the comic is a different style. So and like it's its own like in world kind of thing where it's just like showing off. Like I think it's another example. Like I think that's why Alan Moore is the one to kind of attribute that to, because I think that also, I think if I didn't read it, obviously I just looked at it, but it looked like it was referencing the main Quartermain or whatever that guy's name is, the main guy's like life in like almost like a chick track style little pamphlet almost thing. And it was kind of a neat way of like his what do you call that? His explorations and his exploits, or whatever the words you use for your the things that people would want to chronicleize your life in that way, using like a little format like that, but then it's also inside of a book that is also the the extraordinary gentleman like doing their whatever, right? So I like that kind of bringing the whole, I would have said, I don't know, is that meta stuff? I don't know, just, but again, it helps really just in uh build that in world kind of, really kind of that. I think that's what it really attributes to this being so successful, is it just like there's such a good establishing of like what this is and what it's trying, like how it's trying to suck you in. And of course, uh it's a good example of like how like this isn't necessarily superheroes, but it is like actually this is to finish this out. I think it's kind of cool that he talks about Action Comics and how, and it's a fictional character talking about the real world of comics, which I think is also another big thing that I don't think ever gets, as far as I can tell, it never gets really talked about in the Watchmen movie, where like, because like obviously everyone knows that, well, I say that, but everyone knows that like they originally wanted to use like all the DC heroes and or whatever as stand-ins for all the other characters, like Batman is Rorschach or whatever. I can't remember, Superman's Manhattan Boy or whatever the guy's name is, Doctor Manhattan, whatever his name. Um, but they couldn't get they just didn't want to do that for this project. But I think it's really interesting then that since this must have been a thing where they go, well, we don't have the rights to it, so but we can still reference him. So they still have reference to the first appearance of like Superman in this, which I almost think is actually even cooler. Like instead of going, yeah, we want to just make like a edgy, cool, uh, standalone thing that has all the iconic characters doing these things that are uncharacteristic of them, quote unquote, and then them going, no, and it's like, okay, well, uh, now it's a story about like if in the real world in certain thing, certain key historical things happened and so on, it transpires into what would it look like when people actually were so compelled to uh, like be inspired and like take like the superhero morals and you know moral compass and whatnot, then this is what it would look like, and we're literally just gonna then also then just straight up just name drop Superman. And the nice thing too, also it's DC, so like technically have the ability to. So this probably got okayed, where it's like they don't want them doing certain things in the story, like they don't want to be like we can't have a naked Superman who is killing his girlfriend of radiation or whatever, right? But you can totally talk about how a guy who's inspired by the literal historical, reference or like uh, comic that has, that in. Because I was just like, oh, and that's one of those things too, where like this, I always feel like I don't know if this is in the like other volumes too, where like I guess I always forget that like this is in the back, and it made me almost feel like that was even more interesting when revisiting this. Like I remember like the other stuff that like the actual comic-y stuff. This stuff though, I feel like always gets a back seat to it, and I'm not much of a like like I like books and I'll read books, but like sometimes it's like if it's a comic book, I kind of just want to look at it. I mean, sure I do want to read it, but like and it is nice when things do have but again, I think it has to have like that. It has to synergize. It has to have like the best of everything. Like the the art and the writing all has to kind of work together. If you're just got a bunch of words on the page and I don't care for what the words say and I don't care what the visuals say, I'm just going to be staring at whatever, and I'm just going to go, okay, wow, cool, thanks, and then close it. But yeah, and I also really like that um, Dave Gibbons also did the lettering, so it really made it clear to use you know that person, because I always think that like with me, I'm like I don't want to do the lettering. I don't like to do the bubbles, talk bubbles or anything like that. But then I was also like studying how he drew these, and I always forget sometimes like there are always going to be like shorthand, or there's going to be ways people can like did you know all this, this is kind of almost hand drawn. It's not just a perfect circle, and like I think that's one thing you always have to remind people where like you don't always have to execute the line perfectly, but the line has to then have but the line has to have purpose, which I don't know, don't quote me on that, that's kind of a weird way of saying it, but in this case all the speech bubbles that you would think would be nice and round and perfect and symmetrical and pristine when and same with these the the panels, trying to make the panels all perfect, they're not going to be perfect, especially if you look up real close, and then of course then you look at the original art, and the original art's going to show you all the blemishes of even more stuff that you can't see even on this. um, and it just always at least for me, it always reminds me of like even the masters are fallible, or even like despite all of like the potentially like like they, for example, they see the ugliness in it, everyone else can go, oh, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen, and then it's like, all right, well, I'm glad, because that's what I get paid for, is to convince you to pick this up and buy more. But I mean, even like trying to like describe like what's it going to look like when you have to see through the window, like from the outside. We're just going to do these little wavy blocks of color here. Same with this, like that's what a window is. So you don't think it's just open air, which you would think, oh no, like everything else seems to be done so competently and like by the book. Why do you choose to then do that when you could just either omit that because it's not realistic enough, or just so that you don't confuse your reader going, oh well, we know that that's a solid well, glass is solid, but like it's not just open air, like I said. So um yeah, no, I think there's just kind of some fun little like the things to take away from this. Always like it's the gift that always gives, kind of a I feel like that's the cliche that this can be given. But yeah, again, going back to just like You could argue, like it's not perfect, but it's like all things considered, it is perfect. Like again, that sounds confusing, but yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of this series. Covers are amazing. Uh, we'll continue to see each one and be like, all right, these are giving a lot of great vibes from the get go. I don't know. I just think this has a lot of staying power. Uh, there's just so much that you can just take from, and it's just this one book at this point. There's 11 more to go, and we'll see. I'm assuming we'll just see this keep ticking closer, and I like that as like a what is it like this as the stakes raise or as like tensions rise or as the rising conflict gets to we get to the conclusion and whatnot. Um, you also get a visual in that as well in our the back cover. And yeah, and thanks for joining me. And I hope that long videos aren't obnoxious. I hope I can keep your attention for the 50 minutes that has been this video. And thanks for any interaction, any comment, good, bad. Let's talk it out. Um, I don't, I like both directions. Criticism. I love when I like when people are talking shit. Whatever. You know, subscribe for more of this terrible commentary on comic books and For Eyes out.